You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to the I Still Love This Game podcast. And who would have ever thought we'd be here? One game away from the Toronto Raptors to win the title. And I got to tell you, when I said that this was going to be a competitive series, it was a mixed reaction from you guys. A lot of people agreed with me that it was compelling, it was going to be great, and there was a lot of people that said, you're out of your mind, the Warriors were going to kill them, with or without Durant. And I'm glad I didn't pick the Raptors, but I'm glad I acknowledged that the Raptors were being grossly underestimated in this series. And now they're up 3-1. And the similarities here are unbelievable. They truly, like, when I say similarities, I'm talking about, obviously, for Kawhi Leonard, the similarities between when he won his first title in 2014 and he's on the verge, once again, of winning a title 5 years later with the Toronto Raptors. Now, you might be thinking, where's the similarities? You know, he's completely different player, completely different team, completely different country who he's playing for. But let's recap a little bit where they're at, and then we'll talk about how they got there. But in 2014, who were they going up against? They were going up against LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh. Those guys, you know what? Super team, absolutely. And they were going for their... And they had a lot of hate. They had a lot of vitriol in their direction because of the way that team is constructed, just like the Golden State Warriors. The Toronto Raptors, the Miami Heat were on the verge of their third straight NBA title, just like the Golden State Warriors. When you look a little bit deeper as well, we can talk about series game-by-game results. In the first game of 2014 finals, the San Antonio Spurs, who Kawhi Leonard played for, they won. Then Miami won game 2. And then in Miami, we saw two pretty emphatic victories for the San Antonio Spurs in Miami, just like we've seen two fairly emphatic victories, both by double digits, by the Toronto Raptors. Then, of course, you had LeBron James leaving, and for all intents and purposes, it looks like Kevin Durant is about to leave as well. There are so many similarities here. And, of course, Kawhi Leonard is the MVP. It doesn't really matter at what point, unless we see the series go into 6 or 7 game territory. Kawhi Leonard is the MVP of this series, just like 2014. The only difference is we kind of expected this from Kawhi Leonard this time around. In 2014, it snuck up on us a little bit. But the similarities are incredible when you think about it. And it makes you wonder if this stuff's scripted, because the similarities are eerie when you think about it. But getting back to how we got here, and we saw a very gutsy performance by the Warriors in Game 2. Backs against the wall. They've been blown out in Game 1. Siakam had a fantastic game. Game 2, we saw the Warriors really emerge. And then, things seem to be back to normal, if we can use that terminology. Because the series tied at 1-1, we're like, okay, it should be fine, right? Games 3, Games 4. Games 3, obviously, you got Klay Thompson being injured, in addition to Looney being injured, in addition to Kevin Durant being injured. And I said prior to this series that Kevin Durant is a lot more hurt than what they're letting on, and I stand by that. Because if they didn't play him in the conference finals, I can sort of get that, because that's up against Portland, right? But they didn't even play him in pretty much a must-win situation at home. Because look at the situation they're in now. They're now down 3-1. They're not going to play him there. When are they planning on playing him? When are they planning on using him? If he's available. You would think at this point that he's not available. That this is some psychological thing to keep the Raptors from truly gaining momentum and confidence in this series. Which has backfired big time, because now they have that confidence. And if anything, you may question that, at least from a gambling standpoint. Now, they have ruled him out from game to game, but because they didn't rule him out for the series, I think a lot of money was shifted. Now, if he was genuinely not available and they were teasing that, then that's an issue. And with gambling becoming more and more legal in the United States, that's something that you don't want to be playing with that. Because, I mean, there's nothing in the rule book to say that you have to predetermine how long a player is going to be out for. But if they were fully aware, just say if it was an Achilles injury, which it probably wasn't, but just say it was a much more a severe injury than what it actually was, and they didn't disclose that, and that did influence betting because people were under the assumption that he was going to play, that's dangerous. That's really dangerous from a legal standpoint. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. Kawhi Leonard, my goodness. Because Game 3 was a little underwhelming, as I said, the injuries. But I don't want to hear about it because, let's be honest, in 2015, we saw the Warriors get very lucky with injuries. Drew Holiday was injured. Mike Conley and Tony Allen were injured. Patrick Beverley were injured. Kyrie Irving and who's the other guy? Kevin Love. They were injured. These are every single series they went. And keep note, with the exception of Kevin Love, all those guys were primary defenders on either Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, or in the case of Memphis, both. So that they pretty much that allowed Steph Curry to go up against the likes of Jason Terry or Matthew Dellavedova in the conference final. It was the conference finals, excuse me. And also the NBA finals. They played the Rockets in the conference finals that year. So I don't want to hear about injuries. I really don't. Now, you might think that's a bit hypocritical because the last year when I've been talking about the Rockets, I've been saying, well, they would have won if Chris Paul wasn't injured. I stand by that. I really do. But there was a lot of kickback by that. So, it's not the Golden State Warriors' fault that he got injured. Oh, okay, that's fair enough. But if we're going to compare Chris Paul's injury to, say, Kevin Durant's injury, the difference is you still had 3 All-Stars, or at least 2 All-Stars for Golden State to pick up the load. Plus you had a Finals MVP. Plus you had Draymond Green, who has been an All-Star and a Defensive Player of the Year. And now they've used DeMarcus Cousins, who clearly isn't up to his regular standards. I get that. There's a lot of rust there, athletic rust too. It's not just skill rust, but a combination of it. So I don't really want to hear it because there's still so much more depth. If you take Kevin Durant off this team, you would still think that at least from an accolade standpoint, that the Warriors have the advantage roster-wise, right? But what we're seeing, and why this is so shocking, I don't know, because I've been preaching this for a long time. But what we are seeing with the Golden State Warriors is they're so one-dimensional. You take away Kevin Durant, and they only have 3 All-Stars, and they look terrible. They don't have that counterpunch. This is why I'm hesitant to put them in the great team discussions. You think of all the great teams, whether it's the Rockets of '95, or the Bulls in the '90s, or the Lakers, Celtics in the 80s, or the Celtics clearly in the 60s, or the Lakers in the 70s, the Lakers of the early 2000s. You think of even teams that have won the title once, like Detroit Pistons in 2004, or the Pistons in 89 and 90 as well. All these teams had counters. You couldn't just take away one thing and slow them down on one thing, and then their game plan completely falls apart. And we've seen this so many times before with the Warriors, but they've looked very susceptible up against teams that don't look like they should be able to compete with the Warriors in terms of just when you line up the rosters. But they are able to compete because they take away that one thing that they're very comfortable in. So this is why I've always been hesitant with it, because they've taken it. So obviously Kevin Durant's been taken away from them. But now what they've done is they've slowed down Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. They're still putting up numbers. Don't get me wrong. They are putting up numbers. Clearly Steph Curry is putting up numbers. In Game 3, he put 47, 48 points, whatever it was up. But he wasn't in control of that game. He wasn't controlling the pace. He wasn't controlling the tempo. It was a bend but don't break mentality they had with Steph Curry, and they were allowing him to get his numbers, but he never really controlled the game. You never really felt that game was swinging heavily in terms of momentum towards the Warriors. Game 4 is a different story, and Kawhi Leonard had one of the better starts of a third quarter. I'm not sure if this will get talked about 5 years from now, but when we look back at this title, that's really when this title was won, assuming that they can close out. Because if the Warriors are very good, I mean, we all know this, that the first 5 minutes of the third quarter is typically make or break time in the NBA. Because that will determine the momentum and the intensity of the rest of that second half. And the Warriors have been very, very good, even dating back to the Portland series, or even a little bit further if you want to go back to the Rockets series as well. But you look at how well they've been in the playoffs in those situations. This was, and even, honestly, even the Raptors. The game 2 of the Raptors had a 16-point lead, and that was, or a 15-point lead, it was double digits. And the first 5-6 minutes of the third quarter is really when the Warriors imposed their will. Now we have the other side of it, and we saw Kawhi Leonard come out and he took over that game. He absolutely took over that game. And, all this talk where we were talking about Kevin Durant emerging as a top 5 small forward of all time, quite honestly, he's probably already there. But if Kawhi Leonard pulls this off, he'll have 2 rings as well, just like Kevin Durant. He doesn't have a regular season MVP, but quite honestly, that kind of lost all credibility when you had guys like Steve Nash winning the award twice. He'll have 2 finals MVPs. He would have defeated LeBron James handily, and also done what LeBron couldn't do, and that's take down the Warriors. Although, let me take that back, because LeBron did take down the Warriors without Kevin Durant, and Kawhi Leonard would have done that as well. He hasn't gone up against Kevin Durant, but he's controlled this series. That's an interesting debate. Who do you take? LeBron in his prime or Kawhi Leonard in his prime? They play the same position, but very differently. I would lean towards Durant. Not Durant, sorry. I'd lean towards Kawhi Leonard because I know consistently he will show up defensively. But that's a topic for another day that I'd like to... I will send myself that question. I'll get to my mailbox that way. But let's not get ahead of ourselves as well, because it is a 3-1 lead. And especially this Golden State Warriors team, if anyone can tell you, a 3-1 lead is no longer insurmountable in the NBA Finals, based off what happened in 2016. On top of that, if we want to talk about 2016 as well, the Warriors did overcome a 3-1 lead in that situation, in that playoff run up against Oklahoma, and they looked a lot worse in that series against Oklahoma than what they did or what they are currently looking. Now, the difference, though, is that that Oklahoma team only had 1 more game to close that series out at home, whereas Toronto has 2. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because this Warriors team, let's see what kind of fight they genuinely have. We saw that in Game 2, that kind of fight, that resolve, that Iggy 3, my goodness, what a shot that was. But we saw some resolve there. If they are a genuine all-time great team, this is their moment to prove it. Talk about backs against the wall, especially if Kevin Durant's not playing. But I just don't think they have the firepower to get past it without Kevin Durant. Because if you look, let me pull up the stats while I'm rambling on here. But if you look at, here we are now. If you look at, obviously, Game 3, Steph Curry put up some big points, 47, 48 points, whatever it was. Game 4, even with Klay Thompson, what a gutsy performance this was to play 42 minutes on an injured hamstring. He had 28 points. Steph Curry had 27 points. The next highest scorer was Looney with 10. Draymond Green had 10 as well, but he had a horrific plus-minus because they were leaving him open, and he was still turning the ball over, and he's still missing shots. So there's just clearly, they don't know how to run their offense effectively. If you can take out either one or preferably 2 and contain both of them, Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, they do not have enough scoring. Think back to this as well. I'm just sort of racking my brain here. Without Kevin Durant in the NBA Finals, the Warriors have lost 3 straight in 2016, and they've won 1 out of their last 7 NBA Finals games without Kevin Durant. I remember doing a podcast answering the question, did Kevin Durant save the Warriors' legacy? Because without Kevin Durant, maybe they were just a flash in the pan, even with the 73-win season, because they didn't win the title. Even without the 73-win season, they only have 1 title. And as I said before, maybe that was more luck than anything. it was a timing situation because everyone else was injured that they were playing against. So with Kevin Durant, you can make the argument, okay, I guess, you can talk about what they did in the conference, the Western Conference this season, getting to the finals without Kevin Durant, and that's all well and good, but we are judged by championships in this league. Just ask LeBron James. Getting to the finals, and I'm consistent with this, getting to the finals is not enough. You have to finish the deal. You have to seal the deal. Do we talk about all-time great Olympians because they won silver medals? Or if they just make the Super Bowl? If we talk about all-time great players that have just made the Super Bowl, then is Jim Kelly better than Troy Aikman? I don't think so. So what the point that I'm making here is, without Kevin Durant sealing the deal for them in the finals like he has, then, the Warriors, as I said, they have won one of their last 7 NBA Finals games without Kevin Durant. And we'll see exactly how good they will be without him next year. Because they got a lot of things to fill up. Because in 2016, you didn't have Kevin Durant, and you still won 73 games. But your supporting cast was so much younger. You still had Harrison Barnes too, but your supporting cast was so much younger. So the Sean Livingstons, the Andre Iguodala's, those players. Andrew Bogut was highly effective in that season as well. So without over-exaggerating here or over-emphasizing it, there are some big concerns that this quote-unquote dynasty, because it's hard to call this team a dynasty, because, they've won 3 out of 4 titles. So on paper, you should say that they are a dynasty. But they are such a different team. They reconstructed it on the fly with bringing Durant in. It's like, are they really a 3-time title? Because they're totally different teams. An argument can be made which one was better. It's kind of like the first three-peat for the Bulls as opposed to the second three-peat of the Bulls in the 90s. Even though they won 6 out of 8 titles with Jordan and Pippen, those two teams were very, very different. And you can make a compelling argument for either one being better than the other one. So that's a bit of rambling going on there, but let's get back on topic and talk about the Raptors being 1 game away from the title. Who saw this coming? Who really saw this coming? At the start of the season, who really thought this was possible? And the flip side to what I was saying with Kevin Durant here, saving the legacy, is we don't even know if Kevin Durant would make a huge difference in this series. Maybe it would be 2-2, but the Raptors were very, very good this season when Kevin Durant was playing up against them. And I think in both of those games, or at least one of them, Kawhi Leonard did not play. So the question we've got to ask ourselves is, did Kevin Durant, would he have even made a difference in this when you consider the length? And if he comes back, is he going to make a huge difference? Because you have players that can still challenge his shot and make him work for it. And if he does come back, let's not forget this. It's been, a month? This is how long the NBA playoffs go for, by the way. It's been nearly a month since he's played. Are we expecting him to come back and drop 45? And that's a hell of a task, especially against a defensive unit on the perimeter like that, where you've got Kawhi Leonard, you got Siakam, you got Danny Green. You've got these players that can actually play excellent defense. And when I'm talking about excellent defense, let's not forget Serge Ibaka and all this. His performance in Game 4 reminded me very much of Alonzo Mourning in Game 6 up against the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals, where his energy and his intensity and his resolve and his leadership was just second to none. He is one of the leaders on this team. He may be their most vocal leader on this team. Because we all know Kawhi Leonard's not really a vocal leader. He leads by example. Ibaka may be, and also keep in mind that Alonzo Mourning had never won a title either before 2006. Serge Ibaka never won a title before, assuming that they close the deal here. Serge Ibaka built his game primarily on athleticism and defense. Alonzo Mourning, primarily intensity and defense. They had offensive game, obviously, but that wasn't their strong suit. Their bread and butter was defense. That's what they were known for, their defensive ability, especially shot blocking around the rim. Similarities are right there. And I'm not saying Serge Ibaka in his prime is anywhere near as good as Alonzo Mourning. Do not get me wrong when I'm saying. What I'm saying is the way that, especially that Alonzo Mourning came back and was essentially a role player after his kidney transplant. Very similar circumstances to the way that Serge Ibaka plays now. Now, if we're talking Alonzo in his prime, totally different story. Alonzo was He was in '99. He should have been the MVP, either him or Tim Duncan. And I think they would have given it to him, but they were knocked down in the first round by the Knicks, and they changed it, which is interesting because they didn't do that for Dirk Nowitzki when they were knocked out in 2007 in the first round. So, I look, Alonzo probably deserved it that year. If not, it should have been Tim Duncan, but somehow Karl Malone walked away with it, so that was interesting. But, look, what a fascinating development. And if Kevin Durant does go, what do the Warriors do? That's interesting. What do the Raptors do? How do they bring back Kawhi Leonard? Can Kawhi Leonard really walk away from it? Or does this give him even more of a reason to walk away from it, saying, hey, look, I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish in Toronto. I don't feel like I want to be here. I don't feel any... Does he walk away then? He's already won a title there. What is left for him to do? Win another title there? It may have been harder for him to say no had they had lost in the finals. But we'll see. That will be very interesting. Game 5 is coming up. I think it's tomorrow night or Monday night. It will be, once again, fascinating basketball. It really will be. This whole series has been fascinating. From game to game, the storylines and the reasons to watch have changed. But man, the Toronto Raptors are one game away. Who would have thought they would have won both games in Golden State? And leading into this series, I said it would be interesting to see what happens in terms of how Kawhi Leonard controls the game, and if we're able to get some closure as to what would have happened in 2017 when Kawhi Leonard was injured by that Zaza Pachulia play. I think we're starting to see it. And that's another question mark, obviously, for the Warriors, right? 2017, and that's with Durant. If we're talking about the injury blessings that they got in the teams they played, the Kawhi Leonard situation, where a player was intentionally injured by one of their own players, it's not even a luck situation there. But what we have finally seen is just the Warriors have no answer, and these are very similar teams. We're not talking about 2015 to 2017. We're talking about the 2017 Warriors to the 2019 Warriors. Very similarly built. And of course, Durant's not playing, but still, I can't give him that excuse, because if we're going to nullify this, then we're nullifying every other title for the Warriors. We really are. Whether it's Chris Paul, whether it's Kawhi Leonard, or it's all the players that were injured in the 2015 title. So, prediction time. Look, I've said a lot when it comes to the Warriors, and I've been highly dismissive of them. I tend to think they believe that they are a great team. So I got to give them the benefit of the doubt, and will say that they will not go down without a fight. But it will be awfully difficult, unless if something significant happens, like a Kawhi Leonard injury, for them to go into Toronto and win Game 5. How do you stop that momentum? How do you stop that confidence, that self-belief, that team that just won back to... Look, forget about the fact that they've just won 3 out of 4 games against the Warriors. They won 4 straight as well against Milwaukee. So really, up against Milwaukee and Golden State, in the last, what are we at now? 8 games, they are 7-1. And they're undefeated on the road. The one game they lost was Game 2 to the Warriors. Now, that doesn't really help them now because they're going back home, but you would think that all the confidence that they would have. Now, there's a lot of pressure as well. Can they deliver? But so far, they have delivered every step of the way. And these guys aren't young. You're talking about Kawhi Leonard, been there. He's won a title. He's won a finals MVP. Serge Ibaka, been to the NBA championship. Didn't win. You're talking about Marc Gasol, been to the conference finals, multiple-time Defensive Player of the Year award. Kyle Lowry, I mean, how many times has he played badly in the playoffs? He's still not shooting well, but his leadership is fantastic. And at the start of the season, I said that when I was talking about the Raptors, I said this is the perfect situation for Kyle Lowry because they are no longer reliant on his scoring. So even if his shooting is bad in the playoffs, that's fine because he does every other thing for them, right? He plays excellent help defense and drawing charges, excellent on-the-ball defense. He doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time to be effective. And for a point guard, that's brilliant. And that allows Kawhi Leonard to really take control and have the dominant space on the court. Danny Green has obviously won a title as well. So there's plenty, like maybe the most inexperienced key personality on this Raptors team is Nick Nurse, and that's their coach. But he's been fantastic too. So it's hard for me to even come up with some kind of reason why I should be fearful for the Raptors, apart from the fact they are the Raptors. So I'm going to say the Raptors do win Game 5, but I expect it to be close. I expect the Warriors to bow out graciously, but I think they will be tenacious. Draymond Green, Iguodala, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson. There's a lot of pride there. But they fell short. They fell short of the three-peat. And what is that now? We've got two three-peat for the Bulls, one for the Lakers, one for the Celtics technically, although really they should have two included in there because they won 8 straight. So, I mean, they very nearly had three-peats in a row. When you think about it, isn't that insane? But yeah, if they fall short, they got the closest to not complete it. They were the closest to not complete it. Apart from, of course, the Miami Heat, who did fall in 5 games, to the San Antonio Spurs. So that's today's episode. Interesting developments, and nobody really saw that coming as well, which makes it even more. I like talking about those situations when everyone's expecting at least a 2-2 series. I don't think people would have been shocked if it was a 3-1 series for the Warriors. I think people would have thought, well, they were just... Because leading into it, let's not forget what favorites say were leading into it. As I said, half of the people agreed with me when I said it was going to be a competitive series, and the other half thought I was out of my mind. So it is what it is. But yeah, so I'm hoping that... I'm not hoping that the series ends in 5, but if it does end in 5, I do hope we get a good Game 5. And that's all I got time for today. It was a quick episode. I'm about to head up to Chicago of all places. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. And I will do an episode after Game 5, win, lose or draw for the Raptors, and we'll be talking about that. Thank you very much, and I got to go, so I'll see you later.